Imagine the gut-wrenching silence that falls over a military base when a young Marine simply vanishes. No body, no note, no explanation, while officials shrug and declare it off-duty personal business, washing their hands of responsibility as if a son, a brother, a human being had never existed. For 8 agonizing years, a mother carries that void inside her chest, every unanswered question carving deeper scars, until one ordinary renovation day when workers pull an old air conditioning unit from a barracks wall and discover hidden magazines, a cross pendant, and a pen engraved with her missing son's name. Evidence that explodes the official story and drags a horrifying truth into the daylight. Her gentle, kind-hearted boy did not run away. He was imprisoned, abused, and erased by the very institutions sworn to protect him. This is the true story-inspired nightmare of Private Evan Dalton, a tale of institutional betrayal, unbreakable maternal love, quiet courage in the shadows, and the slow, painful victory of truth over engineered silence. Welcome to this educational deep dive. We will walk chapter by chapter through every shattering revelation, mastering advanced English vocabulary and idioms, drawing philosophical lessons from real historical military scandals, and connecting this modern tragedy to universal wisdom about integrity, resilience, and the moral duty to question authority. Because sometimes the people wearing the uniforms are the ones who need watching most. The fluorescent buzz of Westfield General Hospital's emergency room still echoed in Sarah Dalton's ears as she stepped into the sharp October chill of a New Jersey evening, latex gloves peeled off, shoulders aching after a 10-hour shift of saving strangers, while the one person she most wanted to save had been missing for 8 years. At 47, Sarah had learned to compartmentalize grief the way she compartmentalized trauma codes. Push it to the side, keep moving, keep breathing, but the 3 missed calls from Detective Luis Moreno shattered that fragile equilibrium in seconds. Her hands shook so violently she nearly dropped the phone before she could hit redial. "Mrs. Dalton." Moreno's voice came through careful and measured, the tone law enforcement officers reserve for life-altering news. "We found something at Camp Buckner. It's personal. We need you there tonight." Vocabulary spotlight. Compartmentalize. To separate into distinct mental compartments, often used idiomatically for coping with trauma by isolating painful emotions and life-altering, something that permanently changes one's existence. Historically, Camp Buckner, modeled on real Marine training facilities like Camp Lejeune or Paris Island, carries echoes of documented military scandals: the 1990s tailhook sexual assault scandal, the 2000s hazing and abuse cases at Aberdeen Proving Ground, and the long-suppressed reports of same-sex coercion and punishment in the pre-DADT repeal era, where institutional culture protected predators and silenced victims under the banner of unit cohesion. Emotionally, Sarah's journey begins here, from practiced professional detachment to raw, maternal terror. She changes clothes in a daze, rides 2 hours north in the unmarked car with Moreno and Officer Hans Vansberg, watching New Jersey suburbs dissolve into the dark, forested Hudson Valley, every mile tightening the knot in her stomach. When they reach the base under gathering storm clouds, Corporal Avery James escorts them to Unit 12B, Evan's old room, where evidence markers surround the window-mounted air conditioner. Workers replacing the unit had found gay adult magazines wrapped around Evan's engraved pen and the cross pendant Sarah had given him at his high school graduation. Sarah's knees buckle. She sits on what had been Evan's bed, fingers tracing handwriting she knows better than her own scrawled in the magazine margins. Little notes, crossed-out words, tiny drawings of hearts and question marks. "This is his writing," she whispers, the realization crashing like thunder. Evan had hidden his sexuality, not because he was ashamed of who he loved, but because he feared what the Marines would do if they knew. Philosophical teaching drawn from Hannah Arendt, the banality of evil thrives when ordinary people accept institutional cruelty as normal procedure. Sarah confronts the first layer of that banality here, the casual dismissal of her son's disappearance because it happened off-duty. Modern English learning. Notice how short, fragmented sentences, "this is his writing," convey emotional paralysis far more powerfully than long exposition. Practice this technique when writing about shock or grief. Idiom spotlight. Washing their hands of it. Absolving oneself of responsibility, from Pontius Pilate's biblical gesture. As lightning cracks outside and Captain Charles Vale arrives with practiced sympathy, Sarah feels the first fracture in the official narrative. The storm forces everyone to stay overnight. She lies awake in guest quarters listening to rain hammer the roof, replaying every moment she might have missed. Evan's reluctance to discuss girlfriends, his quiet volunteering at her hospital, the way he always seemed to carry an invisible weight. Tomorrow, she vows, she will ask harder questions. But deep down, she already senses the truth is uglier than absence. Her son had not disappeared. He had been made to disappear. What would you do if the institution you trusted with your child's life suddenly became the prime suspect in his erasure? Would you keep asking questions even when every answer threatens to destroy the world you thought you knew? At 0530, the Barracks military rhythm woke Sarah before her body wanted to move. The same disciplined cadence that had once filled her son with pride now feeling like a taunt. She dressed quickly, splashed cold water on her face, and stepped into corridors already alive with young Marines making racks with hospital corners and trading rough banter that Evan, gentle Evan, had likely never joined. She watched a platoon run PT on the parade ground, breath clouding in the October dawn, and wondered how isolated her son must have felt among men trained to prize aggression over empathy. Needing answers before the formal interviews, she sought Captain Vale's office and, finding it unlocked, heard unmistakable sounds from the attached bathroom, grunts, murmurs, the unmistakable rhythm of sexual activity. Her cheeks burned. She backed away, purse catching a hanger and sending it clattering. Vale's voice snapped, "Who's there?" Sarah fled, heart hammering, only to be called back moments later. The captain stood fully uniformed, unruffled, introducing Private Caleb Ross as the Marine who had been helping with a clogged drain. Ross, same age Evan had been, same lean build, stood rigid, eyes darting, radiating fear. Sarah's medical instinct screamed that the explanation was too convenient, too rehearsed. Vale dismissed Ross with casual authority. The young man's fleeting glance at Sarah felt like a silent plea. Vocabulary moment. Rehearsed, practiced to the point of seeming artificial, and idiom, too good to be true, something that appears perfect but is actually suspicious. Historically, the U.S. military's pre-2011 don't ask, don't tell policy created an environment where same-sex attraction could be weaponized for blackmail, punishment, or coerced silence. Real cases from the 1990s to 2000s include documented instances of commanders exploiting vulnerable service members under threat of discharge or worse. Emotionally, Sarah's arc deepens from shock into suspicion. She no longer trusts the uniform. In the canteen, she meets Hans Vansberg, shares coffee, and notices Ross watching her, then bolting when Vale appears. Ross trips on the stairs in panicked flight, tumbling hard. Sarah's ER training takes over. She stabilizes him, insists on treating him in the infirmary herself. Once alone, Ross confesses. The drain story was a lie. Vale had been abusing him, and Ross believed the captain had done the same to Evan. He produces Evan's stolen journal, olive green military notebook, filled with her son's handwriting. Ross reads entries aloud. Escalating harassment after roommates found Evan's unsent love letters to a female Marine named Amy Chin, accusations of denial, the captain supplying gay magazines to help him accept himself, Evan's growing despair and confusion. Sarah tucks the journal against her ribs like a shield. Ross whispers that Vale disappears to the old gymnasium after disciplinary reviews. Rumors say he gets some substance there. As Corporal James arrives to escort Ross to punishment, Sarah feels the net tightening. She slips the journal to Moreno and Vansberg in a hidden alcove, urging them to read it privately. They hand her a burner phone for emergencies and tell her to lock herself in her room. Sarah lies. She cannot wait. She trails Vale to the abandoned gymnasium, peers through a cracked high window, and witnesses Corporal James beating Ross while Vale watches with relaxed detachment. They drag the bloodied young Marine toward a back door leading underground. Sarah dials Moreno. They're taking him below ground. There's a door. Backup is coming, but slowly. She waits, frozen, until shouts and crashes erupt inside. 4 Marines burst in, drawn by noise. Sarah follows them down concrete stairs into a Cold War-era bomb shelter converted into a prison. Cells with bars, stale air, horror. Moreno has veil pinned. Vansberg cuffs James. Ross slumps in one cell. In the next, skeletal, bearded, eyes vacant, Evan. Sarah drops to her knees. 8 years of prayers answered in the cruelest way. Her son is alive, but barely. Philosophical teaching from Martin Luther King Jr. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. The Barracks culture of silence enabled a private dungeon. One mother's refusal to accept the official story cracked it open. Modern English learning. Contrast passive voice, he was taken. With active voice, they dragged him. To show agency and moral responsibility. Practice rewriting news headlines both ways. Idiom spotlight. The net tightening, pressure increasing, danger closing in. As FBI and state police flood the camp, detaining fleeing conspirators, Sarah realizes the deepest wound is not the years lost, but the knowledge that the people sworn to protect her son had instead destroyed him. If silence is the oxygen that feeds institutional evil, what small, brave act of speaking can you perform today to starve the darkness around you? In the bright sterility of the Regional Medical Center's room 314, Sarah sits between 2 hospital beds holding the hands of the 2 young men who survived held together. Evan, gaunt, bearded, fur lines snaking across paper-thin skin, stares at the ceiling until her voice pulls his gaze to her face. Recognition dawns slowly, painfully, like sunrise after endless night. Mom, he rasps, the single word cracking 8 years of silence. Ross, bandaged and bruised, sleeps fitfully nearby, the journal's revelations still burning in Sarah's mind. Detective Moreno arrives, exhausted but resolute, to deliver the preliminary picture. Vale and James face charges of kidnapping, sexual assault, false imprisonment, conspiracy, and more. 6 other Marines caught fleeing have begun cooperating, naming additional silent accomplices. The underground chamber, built as a Cold War fallout shelter, had been repurposed into a private punishment and abuse facility. Journals, recordings, and physical evidence suggest Evan was not the only long-term captive, though others may have been killed or driven to suicide. Sarah listens, stroking Evan's knuckles, feeling every fragile bone. Vocabulary spotlight. Dawned slowly, understanding arriving gradually, like daylight, and idiom paper-thin skin, extremely fragile, literally or emotionally. Historically, this echoes real scandals like the 1997 Aberdeen Proving Ground sex abuse ring, where drill sergeants preyed on trainees, and the 2003 to 2004 Abu Ghraib revelations, where power imbalances enabled systematic cruelty under military authority. Cases where institutional culture shielded perpetrators until external pressure forced accountability. Emotionally, Sarah's journey reaches catharsis, from denial to rage to a fierce, protective tenderness. She whispers to Evan, "You waited. You stayed strong." He manages a ghost of a smile. "I knew you wouldn't stop looking." Ross wakes, turns his head, and whispers, "You saved us both." Sarah corrects him gently, "You saved each other," by refusing to disappear quietly. Philosophical wisdom from Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. Even when everything is stripped away, the last human freedom is choosing one's attitude. Evan chose hope, Ross chose courage, Sarah chose relentless love. Modern English learning. Reported speech in trauma narratives. He said, "I knew you wouldn't stop looking," adds authenticity. Practice converting direct quotes to indirect speech for formal writing. Idiom spotlight. Ghost of a smile. A very faint, sad smile. As doctors outline the long road ahead, physical therapy for muscle atrophy, nutritional rehabilitation, extensive psychological support, Sarah vows to walk every step beside her son. Outside, news vans gather. Headlines will scream, Marine base horror, 8-year captivity exposed. Inside this room, though, the real story is quieter. 2 broken young men breathing, a mother refusing to let go, the slow return of light after endless dark. What would you hold on to, what single memory or promise? If the world tried to erase you for 8 years, would you still believe someone out there was still searching? Weeks bleed into months of hospital routines, skin grafts, physical therapy sessions where physical therapists applaud tiny victories, a finger curling, a leg lifting an inch, while psychiatrists sit in soft chairs coaxing words from throats that had learned silence as survival. Sarah moves into temporary housing near the medical center, her Westfield house feeling too far from Evan's bedside. She brings him familiar things: the quilt from his childhood bed, photographs of family Christmases, his old sketchbook filled with pencil drawings of birds and trees. Ross's parents arrive from Michigan. The two families form a quiet alliance, sharing waiting room coffee and wordless understanding. Evan speaks more each week, voice strengthening, though certain subjects still make him flinch. Captain Vale's name, the word gymnasium, the smell of concrete. He tells Sarah fragments, how the bullying began with stolen letters, escalated to physical disciplinary reviews, how Vale used the magazines as both lure and blackmail, how one night during a field exercise he was drugged, blindfolded, and taken underground. "They said I was a liability," he whispers. "Said the Corps didn't need my kind." Ross, recovering faster physically, fills in gaps. He had volunteered for extra duties to search offices, hoping to find evidence that could expose the network. Finding Evan's journal had given him courage to keep going. Together they pieced together a timeline that matches forensic evidence. Vale and James had exploited the base's isolation and the military's distrust of weakness to build a private regime of control and abuse. Vocabulary moment: liability. A person or thing likely to cause embarrassment or put one at a disadvantage, here used ironically by abusers. Historically, the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell in 2011 and subsequent DoD reforms were partly driven by cases exactly like this, where fear of discharge silenced victims of same-sex coercion or harassment. Emotionally, Evan's arc is one of reclamation, from erased identity to reclaiming his story on his own terms. Philosophical teaching from Simone de Beauvoir: freedom is not given. It is taken through acts of resistance. Even small, secret acts like hiding a journal become revolutionary. Modern English learning, therapeutic dialogue, he said the Corps didn't need my kind, shows hedging and indirectness as coping mechanisms, analyze how victims soften painful truths in speech. Idiom spotlight, piece together, gradually assemble separate facts into a coherent whole. As federal indictments roll out, Vale facing life without parole, James pleading guilty for reduced sentence, 6 others convicted of conspiracy and obstruction. Public outrage forces Pentagon reviews of base oversight and mental health reporting. Sarah testifies once, voice steady. "They took my son because he was gentle in a place that punished gentleness. They kept him because no one asked hard enough questions." Afterward, she returns to Evan's room, finds him sketching again, a simple pencil outline of a bird taking flight. "I used to draw these when I was down there," he says. "Reminded me there was still sky somewhere." Sarah kisses his forehead. "You're under that sky now." Ross, discharged to outpatient care, visits often. The two young men share a bond forged in darkness that no one else can fully understand. Sarah watches them laugh, quiet, tentative laughter, and feels the first real hope since the phone rang 8 years ago. What small, secret act of resistance are you capable of today? What hidden journal? What whispered truth? What refusal to stay silent? That might one day free someone still trapped in darkness. Years later, on the anniversary of the rescue, Sarah stands on the porch of the renovated Westfield house she shares with Evan, watching him walk, slowly, deliberately, with a cane but under his own power, down the garden path to feed the birds that now flock to the feeder he built. Ross visits every month. The two men have started a nonprofit supporting survivors of military sexual trauma, speaking at bases, testifying before Congress, turning pain into policy change. Evan's sketches hang in galleries. His story, told in measured interviews, helps shift military culture toward accountability and mental health support. Sarah, retired from nursing, volunteers at a crisis hotline, answering calls from parents whose children have gone silent, reminding them that persistence can move mountains. The air conditioning unit from Camp Buckner sits in a museum exhibit on military justice reform, its vents labeled, its hidden compartment preserved, a quiet monument to the moment truth broke through concrete. Vocabulary spotlight. Deliberately, done with careful, intentional slowness, and idiom move mountains, achieve something that seems impossible through persistent effort. Historically, the real reforms that followed scandals like Fort Hood's 2020 Vanessa Guillen case, independent investigation protocols, better reporting channels, prove that public pressure and survivor testimony can force systemic change. Emotionally, the story closes in quiet triumph, Sarah from grieving mother to advocate, Evan from erased victim to artist and voice, Ross from coerced silence to courageous whistleblower. Philosophical wisdom from Viktor Frankl once more. Suffering ceases to be suffering when it finds meaning. Evan found meaning in art, Ross in advocacy, Sarah in love that never surrendered. Modern English learning, reflective closure sentences. He was walking again, not fast but forward. Use parallelism and contrast for emotional weight. Practice writing your own life reflections this way. Idiom spotlight. Under his own power. Acting independently, without assistance. As Sarah watches her son scatter seed and smile at the sparrows that land unafraid, she understands that healing is not erasure of scars, but learning to live beautifully alongside them. The darkness that tried to swallow Evan was vast, but love, stubborn, searching, refusing to accept absence, was vaster still. If a mother's refusal to stop looking can bring a son back from the dead after 8 years, what impossible thing might your refusal to give up achieve in your own life? Today, tomorrow, for someone who still believes no one is coming? Choose to keep searching. Choose to keep asking. Choose to be the light that refuses to go out.